In many maximum security prisons across the United States, a portion of the population is growing older. This shift has been documented in federal and state correctional reports over the past 2 decades. Longer sentencing policies, including mandatory minimums and life sentences, have contributed to a steady increase in inmates aged 50 and above. In some facilities, this group is now one of the fastest-growing demographics. Within these institutions, age does not significantly alter the physical structure of confinement. Cells remain the same size. Movement remains regulated. The daily schedule continues with the same consistency applied to all inmates, regardless of physical condition. In maximum security units, especially those designated for high-control housing, individuals may spend between 22 and 24 hours a day inside a single cell. This level of confinement has been documented in oversight reports, including findings by the U.S. Department of Justice and independent prison monitoring organizations. For older inmates, the effects of this environment are compounded by age-related decline. Mobility becomes limited. Chronic conditions such as arthritis, hypertension, and cardiovascular disease are more common. According to data from the Bureau of Justice Statistics, incarcerated individuals experience higher rates of chronic illness compared to the general population, and these conditions often appear earlier. Inside the cell, space is fixed. There is no accommodation for physical therapy equipment. No structural adjustments for reduced mobility. The standard design assumes a baseline level of physical independence that aging bodies may no longer meet. Simple actions take longer. Standing from the bed requires balance. Walking a few steps across the cell can involve stiffness or discomfort. Accessing the upper bunk in facilities where double occupancy still exists presents documented safety risks for older inmates. Requests for medical attention follow a formal process. In most systems, inmates must submit written requests to access healthcare services. Response times vary depending on staffing levels and institutional capacity. Reports from correctional healthcare audits have noted delays in treatment as a recurring issue in several jurisdictions. The lighting remains constant. Fluorescent fixtures operate on a fixed schedule or remain illuminated at all times in certain units. This environment provides limited exposure to natural light, which research has associated with disruptions in sleep patterns and circadian rhythms. For older inmates, sleep disturbances are already more common. The absence of natural variation between day and night can intensify this effect. Documented accounts from prison health studies indicate that insomnia and fragmented sleep are frequently reported among long-term incarcerated populations. Sound is minimal but persistent. Footsteps in the corridor. The opening and closing of metal doors. Occasional verbal instructions from correctional staff. There are no extended periods of complete silence, but there is also no meaningful variation in auditory environment. Over time, this consistency becomes a defining feature of daily existence. The passage of time is not marked by changing surroundings, but by institutional routine. Meals are delivered through the door. Recreation, when permitted, may occur in a controlled setting, often a small enclosed yard or individual exercise area. In high-security units, this time is limited and may be conducted alone. For older inmates, physical participation in recreation can be restricted by health conditions. Some remain seated. Others walk slowly within confined perimeters. The opportunity for physical activity exists, but the capacity to engage with it varies significantly. Social interaction is limited. In single-cell housing, communication with others may occur through the door or during controlled movement periods. However, sustained interpersonal contact is not a consistent feature of daily life. Research on long-term confinement has documented the psychological effects of reduced social interaction. These include increased rates of depression, anxiety, and cognitive decline. Among aging populations, cognitive changes may already be present. Studies published in correctional health journals have identified higher incidences of dementia-related conditions among older inmates. The structured environment of maximum security housing does not always include specialized accommodations for cognitive impairment. Memory lapses, confusion, and disorientation can occur within a setting that relies heavily on compliance with routine and instruction. Failure to follow orders, even when unintentional, may result in disciplinary measures. Correctional staff operate within established protocols. Their responsibilities include maintaining order, ensuring safety, and enforcing institutional rules. Interactions with inmates are typically brief and task-oriented. There is limited scope for individualized engagement. In this environment, aging is not a separate category of experience. It occurs within the same constraints applied to all individuals under maximum custody. Time continues to pass. Years accumulate within the same physical space. The cell does not change. The schedule does not change. The structure of confinement remains constant, while the individual within it undergoes gradual physical and cognitive transformation. This reality has been noted in multiple oversight reports examining the long-term impact of incarceration. The prison environment is designed for control and uniformity. It is not designed to adapt. For aging inmates, this creates a condition where the body changes, but the conditions of confinement do not. The result is a sustained mismatch between institutional design and individual need. This mismatch is not theoretical. It is documented in medical records, inspection reports, and first-hand accounts collected through legal filings and academic research. Within maximum security facilities, these conditions are not isolated cases. They represent a broader structural pattern. One that continues, largely unchanged as the prison population grows older. Healthcare inside maximum security prisons operates within a structured system defined by policy, staffing, and security requirements. For aging inmates, access to that system becomes a central part of daily life. The prevalence of chronic illness in older incarcerated populations has been consistently documented. Data from the Bureau of Justice Statistics indicates that a significant proportion of inmates over the age of 50 report at least one chronic medical condition. Many report multiple. These conditions include hypertension, diabetes, respiratory illness, and mobility-related disorders. Management of these conditions depends on regular monitoring. In prison, that monitoring is not continuous. It is scheduled. In most facilities, inmates must initiate care through a written request process. These requests are collected, reviewed, and prioritized based on urgency. This system is standard across federal and state institutions, as outlined in correctional healthcare protocols. Delays can occur. Oversight reports from state correctional systems and federal investigations have identified backlogs in medical request processing, particularly in overcrowded facilities or those with limited medical staffing. For older inmates, delays in care can have measurable consequences. Conditions that require consistent management may progress without timely intervention. Missed medication doses, postponed evaluations, and limited specialist access have all been documented in prison healthcare audits. Movement to the medical unit is controlled. In maximum security settings, inmates are typically escorted in restraints. This includes handcuffs and, in some cases, additional restraints depending on classification level. The process is procedural. Security staff coordinate movement. Medical staff prepare for brief, scheduled encounters. Time is limited. Consultations are often conducted within strict time frames, influenced by the number of inmates requiring attention and the operational demands of the facility. This structure affects the depth of medical interaction. Examinations focus on immediate concerns. Long-term management plans may be discussed, but follow-up depends on future scheduling and system capacity. For aging inmates, continuity of care becomes a critical issue. Medical records are maintained within the institution, but staffing changes, transfers between facilities, and administrative constraints can interrupt consistent treatment. Transfers are not uncommon. Inmates may be relocated for security, population management, or medical reasons. Each transfer introduces a period of adjustment, during which access to ongoing care may be temporarily disrupted. Specialized care presents additional challenges. Access to external medical providers requires transport outside the facility. This process involves security coordination, transportation logistics, and availability of external appointments. As a result, specialist consultations are often limited. Reports from correctional oversight bodies have noted that wait times for specialist care can extend beyond recommended medical guidelines. Within the prison medical unit, resources are finite. Equipment is standardized. Advanced diagnostic tools are not always available on-site. In many cases, facilities rely on external providers for imaging and specialized testing. For older inmates, this limitation shapes the scope of care. Conditions that require detailed diagnostic evaluation may not be addressed immediately. Pain management is another documented area of concern. Policies governing medication distribution are influenced by security considerations, including the potential for misuse or diversion. This affects prescribing practices, particularly for medications classified as controlled substances. As a result, some inmates report limited access to certain forms of pain relief. This has been documented in legal cases and healthcare reviews examining correctional medical practices. Mental health services operate within a similar framework. Access is structured through referral systems. Appointments are scheduled. Interactions are monitored. For aging inmates experiencing cognitive decline or psychological distress, consistent access to mental health care is essential. However, availability varies. Staffing levels, institutional priorities, and resource allocation all influence the frequency and depth of mental health services. In some facilities, specialized units for elderly or medically vulnerable inmates have been introduced. These units aim to provide adjusted living conditions, including lower bunks, handrails, and proximity to medical services. However, availability is limited. Not all institutions have dedicated geriatric units, and placement within them depends on classification criteria and available space. For many aging inmates, standard housing remains the only option. Within that environment, healthcare becomes an intermittent intervention rather than a continuous presence. Emergency response protocols are in place. Correctional officers are trained to identify signs of medical distress and initiate response procedures. Medical staff are notified, and emergency care is provided within the constraints of the facility. Response times vary. Factors include location within the facility, staffing levels, and the nature of the emergency. Investigations into in-custody deaths have, in some cases, identified delays in emergency response as contributing factors. These findings are part of public records, including court documents and independent reviews. Documentation is central to the system. Every request, appointment, and treatment is recorded. These records form the basis for oversight, legal review, and institutional accountability. They also reflect the operational limits of the system. For aging inmates, healthcare is not absent. It is structured. It operates within defined boundaries that prioritize security, manage resources, and respond to demand. Within those boundaries, care is delivered. But the consistency, timeliness, and scope of that care are shaped by the institution itself. The result is a system where medical needs are addressed, but not always at the pace or depth required by an aging population. This condition has been observed across multiple jurisdictions. It remains a subject of ongoing review by policymakers, legal advocates, and correctional administrators. Inside the medical unit, the interaction concludes. The inmate is escorted out. The room is reset for the next scheduled visit. The process continues unchanged. Time inside maximum security prison is structured by routine. Each day follows a fixed schedule. Wake-up times, meal distribution, movement periods, and lockdown are regulated by institutional policy. These schedules are designed to maintain order, ensure accountability, and manage large populations within controlled environments. For inmates serving long sentences, this routine becomes the primary framework through which time is experienced. For aging inmates, the passage of time takes on a different dimension. Years accumulate within a system that changes very little. The physical environment remains constant. The daily schedule repeats with minimal variation. External markers of time, seasonal change, social events, personal milestones, are largely absent or reduced. This creates a condition where time is measured not by change but by repetition. Research on long-term incarceration has examined how repetitive environments affect cognitive function. Studies in correctional psychology and geriatric health have identified links between prolonged institutional routine and cognitive decline, particularly among older populations. In these settings, mental stimulation is limited. Access to educational programs, work assignments, or group activities varies by facility and security classification. In maximum security units, opportunities for structured engagement are often restricted. For older inmates, participation in available programs may be further limited by physical condition or medical status. As a result, extended periods of unstructured time are common. This time is spent within the confines of a cell or a controlled environment with minimal variation in activity. Cognitive health depends on stimulation. Memory, attention, and executive function are maintained through engagement, interaction, and variation in experience. In the absence of these factors, decline can occur. Among aging inmates, this decline has been documented in clinical assessments and correctional health studies. Symptoms may include memory loss, reduced attention span, and difficulty processing information. In some cases, more advanced conditions such as dementia are identified. The prison environment is not uniformly equipped to manage these conditions. Staff are trained in security procedures. While some receive training in recognizing signs of cognitive impairment, The primary function of correctional staff remains the maintenance of order and safety. This creates a situation where cognitive decline may go unrecognized or be interpreted as noncompliance. For example, failure to follow instructions may result from confusion rather than intentional disobedience. However, institutional response is guided by observable behavior, not underlying cause. Disciplinary processes are standardized. They rely on documented actions rather than medical interpretation unless formally assessed. For inmates experiencing cognitive impairment, this can lead to repeated infractions. These infractions are recorded. They become part of the inmate's institutional record, influencing classification status and housing decisions. Routine continues regardless of individual cognitive capacity. Announcements are made at fixed times. Instructions are given in standard formats. Compliance is expected within the same timeframes for all inmates. For those with declining cognitive function, adapting to this structure becomes increasingly difficult. Memory plays a central role in navigating daily routine. Remembering meal times, medication schedules, movement procedures, and institutional rules requires consistent cognitive function. When memory begins to deteriorate, the structure that once provided predictability becomes a source of confusion. Some facilities have introduced screening processes for cognitive impairment. These assessments are conducted by medical or mental health staff and may lead to adjusted housing or treatment plans. However, implementation varies widely across jurisdictions. There is no single standardized approach applied uniformly across all maximum security institutions. In many cases, aging inmates remain in general population or high-security housing without specialized support. Within the cell, time is unstructured. Reading materials may be available, depending on institutional policy and individual access. Television, where permitted, provides limited external input. However, these forms of engagement are passive. They do not replace the level of interaction typically associated with cognitive maintenance. Repetition becomes the dominant experience. Days are marked by the same sequence of events. Weeks and months pass with minimal distinction. For younger inmates, this structure may be navigated with relative consistency. For older inmates, especially those experiencing cognitive decline, the effect is cumulative. Disorientation can increase over time. The distinction between days may become less clear. Institutional routines continue to operate with precision. Doors open and close on schedule. Lights turn on and off according to policy. Staff rotations follow established patterns. The system maintains consistency. Within that system, individual cognitive capacity may change. This divergence creates a gap between institutional expectation and individual ability. The gap is not always visible. It is reflected in small actions. Missed instructions. Delayed responses. Repeated questions. These are documented in institutional records, but they do not alter the structure itself. The environment remains fixed. For aging inmates, time is not only passing. It is accumulating within a framework that does not adapt to cognitive change. This condition has been noted in correctional health literature and policy discussions. It raises questions about how institutions designed for control manage populations with increasing medical and cognitive needs. Inside the corridor, movement continues. The inmate reaches the end of the designated path. He turns, under instruction, and begins the return. The environment remains unchanged. The routine continues. Movement inside a maximum security prison is regulated through a system of control points. Each transition from one space to another requires authorization. Gates open and close in sequence. Inmates move individually or in small, supervised groups, depending on classification level and institutional policy. For aging inmates, movement is not only a procedural matter. It is also a physical challenge. Correctional systems are designed around standard assumptions of mobility. Walking short distances, standing for periods of time, and responding promptly to instructions are built into daily operations. These expectations remain consistent across age groups. However, physical capacity changes over time. Data from correctional health studies indicates that incarcerated individuals often experience accelerated aging. Factors contributing to this include pre-existing health conditions, limited access to preventative care prior to incarceration, and the cumulative effects of long-term confinement. As a result, inmates in their 50s or 60s may present with physical conditions more commonly associated with older populations outside prison. Joint stiffness, reduced balance, and chronic pain are frequently reported. Within the movement system, these conditions become visible. Walking speed decreases. Transitions between standing and sitting take longer. Maintaining balance during escort, especially while restrained, requires additional effort. Restraints are standard during movement in maximum security environments. Handcuffs are typically applied in front or behind the body, depending on classification and risk assessment. In some cases, additional restraints such as waist chains or leg irons are used. These measures are part of established security protocols. For older inmates, restraints can affect stability. Handcuffs limit the ability to use arms for balance. Leg restraints, when applied, restrict stride length and increase the risk of tripping. These effects have been documented in correctional safety reviews and legal filings related to in-custody injuries. Falls are a recognized concern. Reports from prison oversight bodies have identified incidents involving older inmates who fall during movement or within housing units. In some cases, injuries sustained from falls require medical intervention. The built environment does not always include adaptive features. Handrails, non-slip flooring, and accessible design elements are not consistently present in older facilities. Where modifications have been introduced, they are often limited to specific units or medical areas. In standard movement corridors, the design remains unchanged. Security procedures take precedence over accommodation. Movement is timed. Delays can affect the operation of the entire unit. As a result, inmates are expected to keep pace with scheduled transitions. For those with reduced mobility, this expectation creates pressure. Correctional staff manage movement through verbal instruction. Commands are clear and direct. Inmate, step forward. Stop. Turn. These instructions are issued in a consistent format. Compliance is required. For aging inmates, responding to these commands may involve physical strain. Turning while restrained requires careful balance. Stepping through a narrow gate opening demands coordination. Pausing too long can disrupt the sequence. However, the system is not designed to pause. Each gate operates as part of a larger controlled flow. Once one gate opens, another is prepared. The process continues with minimal interruption. This structure is central to maintaining security. It also limits flexibility. Within this environment, physical decline is managed rather than accommodated. Inmates adjust their movement to fit the system. The system does not adjust to individual movement. Medical accommodations may be issued. These can include lower bunk assignments, restrictions on certain types of work, or authorization for assistive devices such as canes. However, the use of assistive devices is subject to security approval. Items must be inspected, documented, and authorized for use within the facility. Even when permitted, their use during movement may be restricted depending on security protocols. Transport outside the facility introduces additional considerations. Older inmates requiring hospital visits or specialist care are escorted under full security measures. This includes restraints and supervision throughout the process. Extended periods of sitting in transport vehicles can be physically demanding for individuals with chronic pain or limited mobility. These conditions have been noted in reports examining the treatment of elderly inmates during off-site medical transport. Inside the facility, movement remains routine, scheduled, controlled. Each step is accounted for. Each transition is monitored. For aging inmates, this routine intersects with physical limitation. The distance between cell and medical unit, between housing and recreation, between one gate and the next, becomes a measurable effort. The environment does not change to reduce that effort. Instead, the individual adapts. This adaptation is ongoing. It is visible in posture, in pace, in the way balance is maintained against fixed surfaces. These are not isolated observations. They are consistent with documented patterns in correctional health and safety reports. The system continues to operate as designed. Gates open. Instructions are given. Movement proceeds. At the final gate, the inmate pauses. The officer signals. The door opens. He steps forward, maintaining balance within the constraints applied to him. The gate closes behind him. The sequence resets for the next movement. Nothing in the structure has changed. A discharge processing area inside a United States maximum security prison. The room is functional and minimally furnished, with institutional desks, filing cabinets, and a secured exit door in the background. Fluorescent lighting casts an even, neutral tone. An elderly inmate stands near a counter, holding a small clear plastic bag containing personal documents and a few belongings. His posture is slightly stooped. His clothing appears recently issued for release, plain, non-institutional, but simple. A correctional staff member stands behind the counter, reviewing paperwork. Beyond the secured door, Faint daylight is visible through reinforced glass, creating a contrast between the controlled interior and the outside environment. The camera angle is positioned from behind the inmate, facing the exit, emphasizing distance between the individual and the outside world. The space is quiet, procedural, and without ceremony. Narration text. For some aging inmates in maximum security prisons, the sentence has an endpoint. Release is scheduled. The process follows a defined administrative path. Documentation is reviewed. Identification is confirmed. Personal property, if retained, is returned. In most cases, the transition is brief. There is no extended preparation period built into the final hours. The system that has structured daily life for years, sometimes decades, moves the individual through one final sequence. For older inmates, release does not erase the effects of confinement. Data from reentry studies and correctional research indicates that individuals leaving prison at an advanced age face distinct challenges. Many have spent long periods in controlled environments. Their daily routines have been externally managed. Decisions about movement, meals, medical care, and interaction have followed institutional rules. Upon release, these structures are removed. The transition is immediate. Outside the facility, the pace and variability of daily life differ significantly. For individuals who have spent years in maximum security conditions, adjustment can be difficult. This is not an abstract concern. It has been documented in reentry research conducted by criminal justice organizations and academic institutions. Older former inmates often encounter barriers related to housing, employment, and healthcare access. Physical health conditions require ongoing management. Continuity of care depends on access to external medical systems, which may not be immediately established. Prescription medications provided during incarceration may need to be replaced or reauthorized. Gaps in coverage can occur. Cognitive decline, when present, complicates the transition further. Tasks that require memory, planning, and decision-making become part of daily survival. These include navigating transportation, managing appointments, and maintaining personal safety. Within prison, these functions were structured. Outside, they must be managed independently. Family connections vary. Some individuals maintain contact throughout incarceration. Others do not. Lengthy sentences can lead to the loss of social networks. Friends and family members may no longer be available. In these cases, release occurs without a stable support system. Reentry programs exist. They provide assistance with housing, employment placement, and access to services. However, availability and capacity differ by jurisdiction. Not all individuals receive the same level of support. For those who remain incarcerated into advanced age, release may not occur. Life sentences, with or without the possibility of parole, continue to define their status. In these cases, aging takes place entirely within the institution. Correctional systems have acknowledged this shift. Policy discussions at the state and federal level have addressed the increasing number of elderly inmates. Topics include medical costs, facility adaptation, and the potential use of compassionate release programs. Compassionate release allows for the early release of inmates who meet specific criteria, often related to serious medical conditions or advanced age. Eligibility requirements are strict. Approval processes involve legal review and administrative decision-making. Not all applications are granted. Public records indicate that while the use of compassionate release has increased in some jurisdictions, it remains limited relative to the size of the aging prison population. For those who remain, the environment does not change. The same cells, the same corridors, the same routines. Aging continues within a structure that was not designed for it. This condition has been documented in correctional reports, legal filings, and independent investigations. It reflects a broader shift in the composition of the incarcerated population, one that continues to evolve. At the point of release, the final barrier is procedural. A door opens. The individual steps forward. There is no adjustment in lighting, no gradual transition. The exterior environment is immediate. For those who leave, the experience of confinement does not conclude at the threshold. It remains in physical condition, in routine memory, and in the habits formed over time. For those who stay, the structure continues unchanged. The system remains in place. The schedule continues. The population ages within it. This is not a temporary condition. It is an established reality, documented across multiple correctional systems in the United States. The camera holds on the exit. The door remains open for a moment, then closes. Inside, the environment returns to its standard state. Controlled, consistent, unaltered. If you found this examination valuable, you can engage further by sharing your perspective, continuing the discussion, and following for additional documented insights into institutional life.